I grew up in the Midwest US. When I was a senior in high school, I was out for a hike at a local trail in the National Forest. This was a good 20 miles out of town, way out in the sticks. It's a box canyon, so you can start at the rim and hike down into the canyon. It was autumn and late afternoon when I pulled into the empty parking area, but there was plenty of light. By the time I got to the bottom of the canyon, the sun was getting pretty low. I was down in the canyon and got that feeling that something wasn't right. I started looking behind me as I walked, every few steps. I just couldn't shake this feeling. Finally, one of these backward glances, I spotted a man peeking out from behind a tree. Not far at all, maybe 100 feet. It was the weirdest thing to catch a guy watching me. He knew I'd seen him and stepped out, saying, "Sorry, I didn't want to scare you." He was an adult man. I was a scrawny 17-year-old kid. We were on the trail in a public park. There was no reason to hide. I wouldn't have been surprised or alarmed to see another hiker there, unless they were acting like a freaking weirdo. I mumbled something about getting back to my car and started to head back toward the parking area, leaving him standing there. As soon as I got out of view, I ran all the way back to the parking area, where there were no cars other than mine, which just added to the weirdness. I realize it's entirely likely that he was on foot and possibly lived near the trailhead, as there were houses out there. But it's interesting how you get that sensation that you're being watched, and it often turns out to be true. If you see someone hiking alone, try not to be a damn creep. It was April 1979. I was walking home from school with my girlfriend, and we decided to take the shortcut through the woods when I saw a dark figure standing in the window of this house. I asked my girl if she saw it too, and she said no. So the next day, I went through the woods alone, because my girlfriend was sick. So I looked for the figure in the window, but nothing was there. Then, suddenly, she popped up out of nowhere and looked up at me. I couldn't believe it. She had no face and no legs, and before she disappeared, she let out a skin-crawling scream. And then she was gone. The next day, we took the long way home. This happened this summer in northern Ontario, Canada, near the town of Parry Sound. Me and my friend had headed up north to spend some time up at the granddad's cabin. He shares with a few other hunters and was next to a very long lake. You need to take a boat to get to the cabin. I had gone up there a few weeks prior just to wander around and help my dad with some repairs and improvements that he was making to the cabin. While I was there, I looked on a printout of a satellite map they had in the camp of the area. There was no Wi-Fi in the cabin, and it was sort of in the valley, and it was very hard to get any sort of signal. And I noticed that there was a small lake north of the one we were at, and there was a small island inside the lake. Me and my dad took the boat to the area and found a nice, pristine little island. We didn't go on it, only looked at it, and a nice lake with some swampy areas, and a small fiberglass boat the hunters used to hunt ducks in the lake sometimes, near the right of where we were. The lake was much higher than the one we came from, and it would have been impossible for us to take the boat we came in up the hill to the lake. Me and my friend headed back to explore the island. We headed up the hill and noticed that there was a small gorge that led into the lake. It used to be a river, but was blocked up by a beaver dam. Me and my friend started to walk through it, and I started to feel uneasy simply because of the increase of bugs in the gorge, and being slightly afraid of running into a beaver pissed off due to us being close to its home. Turns out that my friend was also feeling that same feeling, but he couldn't figure out why. He just felt that there was something weird about this lake. We left the gorge and made our way to the top of the hill where the lake greeted us. We overturned the boat, and after a few failed attempts of trying to launch the boat, we made it into the lake. Now, I must say, I am almost 6'4", and my friend is around 5'7", so trying to fit us into a tiny boat, plus our bags, made it a bit challenging, along with there being only one oar. We had planned on bringing two, but thought one would be good enough. We made our way to the middle of the lake, aiming for the island. with my friend rowing the boat. He had more experience rowing with one oar than I did. We both were feeling uneasy, but I just put mine off to 1, being in a small boat that could tip over if one of us sneezed, and 2, being almost an hour away from any town or hospital, so we were both kind of worried about getting hurt or stranded. But at this time, we were feeling okay, until the boat stopped moving. We were in the middle of the lake, with a small swamp in front of a rock face around 20 feet from our left, and the woods to the right. We could see the water around us moving, the wind creating a slight wave. We carefully looked below us to see if we had hit a sandbar, but we didn't see any sand beneath us, only just the dark, black waters of the lake. We put the oar in the water and didn't feel any current. We found, though, that we could move to the left and the right, but just not forward, almost like we had hit an invisible wall in a video game. We both felt the boat starting to sink down, almost like it was being sucked into the lake. My friend started to row to the right, and we made our way to the right. Then, once near the coast, we made it to the island. From far away, the island seemed to be nice and pristine. But once we got close, we saw that it seemed desolate. The trees were dead or dying, and the island was covered in stone, pine needles, and dead lichen with swamp and decay covering the lake. We tied the boat to a sturdy, although dead, pine tree, and spent some time on the island, checking it out and looking for anything of interest. After spending some time on the island and running out of bug spray, we decided to head back to the cabin. My friend took the oar and started to probe the water around the island to find a good place to portage out. Around this time, both me and him started to feel a grave sense of unease. Personally, it felt like a feeling of pure dread, sort of like the feeling you get when you get a test that you failed back, mixed with every instinct in my body saying, "Get out of here, you're gonna freaking die if you stay." We heard some commotion in the water and looked and saw, around 10 feet away from us, we saw some geese run into the water. And right where they came from, we saw what looked like a black shape scuttle and crawl beneath some rocks. Kind of like a mix of, I guess the closest thing I could think of would be of in Star Wars, when the Jawas went behind the rocks. My friend also said that he heard a strange noise, but I didn't notice it. We had also noticed too that the lake had gotten awfully still, and that the forest had fallen quiet. We found a good place to portage from, and we decided that I would row back. As we headed our way back, I looked from where we started, and saw a strange black stick-like figure standing from where we left. At this point, I didn't want to point it out, so I just kept rowing. I would row for around 7 minutes, then take a short break. But whenever we would take a break, we could hear the crunching of leaves and breaking of branches following us in the woods. I hugged the coast as we headed back. Even when staying around 12 feet away from the shore, I couldn't see the bottom of the lake. We eventually got back and put the boat back where we found it. When we tipped it over, we noticed that there were scratch marks all over the bottom of the boat that looked like something had tried to claw it. As we started to leave, we decided to take one last look at the beaver dam, where we soon noticed that there was a cave behind the dam. Upon seeing this, we decided to get the hell out of there. We made our way back to the main lake, where we used our walkie-talkie to tell my granddad to come pick us up. He was with some hunting buddies that day. And on another note, I forgot to add that we tried to walkie him on the island, but we couldn't get any signal. As we left, I looked back, and I saw that figure standing on the island. Later that night too, as me and my friend were at a fire pit next to the cabin, we started to hear strange noises coming from the woods, almost like a person trying to make the hoot sound of an owl. Although, this could have just been my granddad's hunting buddies in the cabin. But yeah, that's the gist of the story. The land itself used to be Ojibwa, and I'm wondering if anyone has any sort of guess as to what me and my friend saw. Just to sum it up real quick. Boat stopped mysteriously, sense of dread, weird black figures, weird noises similar to static or screaming on the island, and strange hooting at the cabin. I went to summer camp in a rural part of New Jersey back in the mid-1990s. The camp was situated on a long, narrow, man-made lake. One end of the lake was reserved for swimming, which we would do as a group activity every other day or so. The swimming area had one long dock stretching straight into the water and two square floating docks further out. One of the 2 floating docks was a bit far away, and although I had spent a few summers at this camp at the time of this incident, I had never seen anyone use that second dock. One day, our group of about a dozen 11-year-olds got the bright idea that we were going to swim out to the faraway dock. I would consider this to be a moderate challenge for even a casual swimmer. When we reached the dock, I noticed a strange-looking spider on the ladder that you had to use to climb up. It was quite large in terms of overall footprint, probably about 2 inches, around 5 centimeters, from end to end, with long skinny legs. Spiders, of course, are normal critters to encounter in nature, but this one stood out to me because of its unusual appearance. After a long swim, we took a few minutes to lie on the dock and rest in the sun. It was relaxing, and we were all having a good time. We started messing around and decided to play one of our regular games where we would all shuffle toward the center of the dock, causing it to sink. As the corner of the dock started to sink and fill with water, suddenly, hundreds of giant spiders came frantically pouring out from between the boards, swarming over and around the feet of those of us who were still standing on dry ground. This dock was theirs, apparently. We all immediately began to scream and jump into the water trying to get away, but the spiders were in the water too, and stuck to us as we swam. I vividly remember the feeling of them clinging to my wet hair, fleshy bodies, and long squirming legs hopelessly intertwined in my own strands. Adrenaline propelled us back to the main part of the swimming area, and by the time we got there, thankfully, we were spider-free. But this is a childhood trauma that still lingers with me. I had not really been afraid of spiders before, but I would say that this was a major turning point. The thought of us lying on the dock in the sun, completely oblivious to the horde that was lurking just inches beneath us, still creeps me out to this day. I just wanted to start by saying that I really enjoy this sub, so I wanted to add a little tale of my own for everyone on here to enjoy. When my cousin and I were younger, we spent a great deal of time together. We would get into all sorts of mischief, as boys do. I was staying over at my aunt and uncle's, visiting my cousin one weekend when we came across something that, at the time, we didn't think to bring up to anyone older and smarter than we were. We live in South Carolina, for what it's worth, and we were around the ages of 12 and 8, me being the older of the two. The area around my aunt and uncle's house has some small, densely wooded areas, but overall, the area isn't anything I'd consider rural. We decided to explore an area of woods across from my aunt and uncle's house, a spot we hadn't really explored much of. Not too far from the road, we came across an old house. It wasn't in bad shape, and even had a little garden with a well enough tended flower bed. Our first thought was, reasonably enough, that we'd run into someone's yard. Passing through, we noticed one of the windows to the home was broken, so we decided to peek inside. There wasn't much of anything in the house. It was devoid of furniture or anything else that would imply that someone actually lived there. Naturally, we tried the door to see if we could get in. No luck. We then heard a car pulling up to the house from the opposite side of us. My cousin and I darted for the tree line and followed some power lines into the nearby woods. A large section of the woods here had been cleared out to allow for the power lines to be where they were. So, picture a clearing of around 100 or so feet surrounded by woods on either side. After following the power lines for quite a bit, we got hit by the unmistakable smell of something dead. We kept on and noticed a wooden tower stand off the side through the woods a bit. We excitedly hurried to investigate it. On the way, we found a dead dog. That would explain the smell, and wasn't too unusual. Then we found another, and another. Surrounding the entire stand were the corpses of dead dogs. It had to be over 30 carcasses. They were all in varying states of decay. Some seemed only a few days old. Some were nothing but bones. We were alarmed, but still dumb kids and still wanted to climb to the top. So we did. And at the top, we found even more dog carcasses. So, process this. Not only were there bodies of dead dogs surrounding this tower stand, Someone put forth the effort to drag them some 30 feet up a slim ladder to the top. Unsettled, we made our way back to my aunt and uncle's after that. We never mentioned it to anyone, or at least I never did. Thinking back on it, 15 years later, we definitely should have said something. I've tried looking up similar things in the area, but haven't had any luck. We never went back there after finding that horrible scene. I also wouldn't conclude that the house we found or the person that showed up there are in any way related to the tower stand. That's just how our story began. Hey there, listeners. I hope you enjoyed that video. I know you may have noticed that there was no intro on this video. That was by design. I'm trying to kind of just jump into the stories a little quicker here. We'll probably still do intros on the horror fiction stories, but I think on the true collections, I'm just going to jump straight into them. I love doing intros for you guys, but I feel like it might be hurting my channel some, so I think I'm going to stick with just outros and just let the stories do the talking at the beginning. So if you want to hear me rant, you have to wait until the end. All that said, hopefully you guys liked this. This was just a fun collection of backwoods horror stories. Just stories that played out in the backwoods, I guess. I thought it was a neat collection, so I wanted to throw it in here. If you guys did enjoy, please do hit that thumbs up button to let me know you liked it. Also, please do remember to subscribe to the channel to get more content like this. And hit that bell icon to be notified whenever I put out new videos, because that's important for me as well. Lastly, you can leave a comment if you really enjoyed it, because that would mean a lot to me as well. I'd love to hear from you. Down in the description, you'll find all the links to these stories. They're all sourced down there. You will also find links to my subreddit, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as a page where you can submit a story to me for my channel. Please take advantage of that if you have something you would like me to read. I appreciate everyone who's done so. I've had a few, and it really does help. All that said, I just want to say thank you for listening. I love you all. Have a fantastic day, night, week, whatever it is. And we'll see you next time. But until then, sleep well.